समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Now we come to the third and the last part of this first person second draft series from Sri Lanka, from my reporting years in Sri Lanka. The reason we decided to do this now, the video version, is because this week was the anniversary of Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, and also General Amarjit Singh or Amar Kalkat passed away just last month. He was the GOC-in-C of the IPKF, commander of the IPKF, who tilted this situation in Sri Lanka, who restored sanity in Sri Lanka. Otherwise, there seemed to be a lot of confusion militarily as well. However, I start this third and last part of the series on a somber note, because this is one box nobody would like to check on their CV, not even the most battle-hardened hack. But early in September of 1989, I found myself in the wrongest place at the wrongest time and witnessed my first and hopefully only live, apologies for that horrible malapropism, but we are all brainwashed by news TV now, so everything is live this, live that. So I witnessed my first live execution ever. This was in the middle of Gall Road, Colombo's shopping and pleasure trip, studded with clubs and malls. For a moment, it had even seemed that the gunshot roar had come as a relief. There was a mild groan and silence again. And as I reported then, in what you may call the first draft of this story, that was headline Sri Lanka falling apart, in the India Today issue of September 30, 1989, when a man is shot in the head with an M16 rifle at just 30 meters, he just drops dead. Soldiers jump past streams of blood and poke the body with gun barrels. Anyone who tries to take a picture will join his body in the ambulance, warned the officer. Since all of us had just seen him carry out an execution, nobody would even think of doing that. This was the Sri Lanka of 1989. The victim had been clutching a bag. Soldiers suspected it contained a bomb and challenged him. He just sat down in fright as snipers took positions and a crowd of hundreds gathered as if around a street performer. The man, obviously frozen in terror, just continued sitting quietly. It is a horrible comparison if you saw the film, but years later, as I watched Kevin Spacey on his knees, his face in portrait of meditative peace, waiting for Brad Pitt to shoot him in David Fincher's disturbing dark thriller Seven, this execution came back to me. Unlike Spacey's evil John Doe, however, this was a totally innocent man. It's just that you somehow saw calm, not fear on his face. The set piece in place, and too scared to close in case he was a suicide bomber, a sniper first shot him in the shoulder. He lay writhing in pain, still quiet. "Shoot him! Kill him now!" shouted the officer. Another sniper shot him in the head. Next to his body, his bag now lay, its contents spilled, fresh vegetables, 2 coconuts. 5 minutes later, the road was open and the life was back to normal. For me, it was just an evening walk from crowded Dehiwala to my hotel, Lanka Oberoi, now Cinnamon Grand. No part of the subcontinent is unfamiliar with mass violence. But you've seen nothing like Sri Lanka in those years. Corpses floated down rivers, hung from trees, smoldered by the roadside, smelling of flesh and rubber. The smell told you the favored method of execution in Sri Lanka then was not a single M16 bullet, but necklacing, tie the arms, put a tie around the man's neck, throw it in of kerosene, and a burning cigarette. On the drive from Katunayake Airport to Colombo, as you crossed Kelania, also called Kelani Ganga River, where a little upstream, the 1957 World War II classic The Bridge on the River Kwai was shot, You looked down instinctively for floating bodies. You were rarely disappointed. The Colombo commuters and school children's favorite pastime was hanging around the Kilani Bridge looking for bodies. In fact, a day before I witnessed that execution, the state owned Daily News reported that the price of fish was crashing. Who would want to buy fish feeding on human bodies in the rivers? Mind you, this wasn't the Tamil North and the East. Prabhakaran was not to blame for this, though he was up to his own stuff in the North and the East, on the run from IPKF, but carrying out the odd deadly ambush and cutting that diabolical deal with Premadasa. This was, on the other hand, also the turn of the Sinhala mainland to be on fire. The radical left insurgency raged, led by JVP or Janata Vimukti Perumana. Sinhala killed Sinhala, soldiers killed civilians, guerrillas killed soldiers, and state-sponsored vigilantes, green tigers, yellow scorpions, blue cobras, and so on killed whoever they wished to. Tens of thousands were killed in a small population. Tens of thousands were killed during those months. Led by Rohana Vijayveera, as charismatic and cruel as Prabhakaran, the JVP paralyzed Sri Lankan elites. My old friend and Tamil moderate politician and lawyer Nilan Tiruchelvam put it brilliantly as only he could. Doctors can't treat, teachers cannot teach, lawyers cannot defend. The very basis of our lives is under threat. In those 5 weeks, the toll in just Sinhala areas crossed 5,000. And remember, the total Sinhala population then would not have been more than 1.2 crore. Sinhala population, I said. This when there had been no riots, just targeted killings. The JVP brutalized Sri Lankan society even more than the LTTE because it wrecked their heartland. LTTE was still far away, the north and the east, the peripheries. JVP wrecked the heartland, Sinhala heartland. And then, all of a sudden, in fact, in just 2 months after I witnessed that execution, the JVP story was over. Rohan Gunaratna has written wonderfully detailed accounts of this, but basically, in November 1989, Vijay Veera and his deputy were captured and killed, but not before they had revealed, under torture of course, all that they knew. Then it was just a matter of the forces and the vigilantes picking out the rest within days. And the brutal 2009 assault that finished the LTT was a similar success later on an enormously larger scale. This, however, was an intelligence slash police slash vigilante operation. On the same tour of duty, the Tamil areas presented a different picture. The IPKF was now quite dominant, and the LTT was in hiding. Between RAW and the Indian Army, two anti-LTT armed groups, EPRLF and ENDLF, that is Elam People's Revolutionary Liberation Front and Elam National Democratic Liberation Front, had been set up. Essentially, these were armed mercenaries, crueler than the LTT, but with not a fraction of their discipline. Eventually, the LTT massacred most of them. I have in my notebook two remarkable lines from these fighters. A namesake, Shekhar, it's published in India Today with his picture. He said, "Life is like a hand grenade. You wait for more than a second after pulling the pin and it's all over." Sure enough, this 18-year-old EPRLF fighter said this clutching a grenade in one hand and AK-56 in the other. And Mangal Raja, 26 of the ENDLF, simply said, "First you fight for revenge, then you can do nothing else. You cannot do anything else." I also remember Jayantan 10 and Paradaman 12 at Velbattiturai, cousins at Velbattiturai village, who expertly dodged IPKF patrols to distribute cyclo-styled LTT leaflets. They happily posed for pictures, bicycles, pamphlets and all, and spoke glowingly of how they waited to turn 15 so we can use guns, not leaflets. From all accounts, subsequently the LTT dropped that age restriction as well. They recruited children as LTT soldiers. On the Sinhala side, nobody personified that cycle of killing and revenge more than the DIG of police, Premadasa Udgom Pola, then 46 and widely hailed as Sri Lanka's Dirty Harry. I drove to Kandy in the mountains, where he was then posted to see him. His only mission was to finish the JVP. "Why such cruelty?" I asked him, surveying his office. Several makes of grenade and dum-dum bullets in the half-open drawer of his desk. The ammunition ban, This is the ammunition banned by Geneva Convention and which he preferred in his favorite .38 Browning, and it would shatter a human body at close range. That picture with his entire armament, personal armament, was published in India Today. An Uzi submachine gun lay to his right, a light machine gun next to his chair, and not to take any chances, a commando knife under the pile of his files. Why so cruel, you ask me? He said, how can I forget? July 28, 1988, that is when the JVP ransacked his native home in Gaul, slaughtering his 78-year-old mother, brother, sister-in-law, and 2 children. He caught each one of the killers and personally supervised their execution. Slowly, patiently, his words. He made no excuses, no evasions. They showed me no mercy, he said. I show them no mercy. Pouring a refill in my teacup. Once finished with the JVP, Udugampola joined politics. But not everybody who came across was a bloodthirsty human bomb of some sort. Sri Lanka had its men of peace. They just lived even less longer than the mass murderers. One of every visiting journalist's favorite was lawyer in TULF, that is Tamil United Liberation Front, a mainstream political party, Tamil party, was Member of Parliament Nilan Thiruchelvam. We loved his home for his warmth, food, drink, insight, and quotable quotes. I later served for several years on the board of the International Center for Ethnic Studies, ICES, which he and fellow Singhala intellectual Kingsley De Silva ran from Colombo and Kandy. It was on the day of one of these board meetings on July 29, 1999. Long after I had ceased to be an active reporter, Neelan just said, let's have breakfast before we meet for the board meeting. This was to be at 10, an hour before the board meeting. I waited for him, pacing up and down the lobby of the Intercontinental, now the Kingsbury Hotel in Colombo, and wondered how Neelan, ever so British and proper, could be so late. He was so punctual until a bellboy told him he had just heard on radio that Neelan had been assassinated on his way to the hotel. An LTT human bomb threw himself on the bonnet of his car and pulled the trigger. His cremation that afternoon was one of the most devastating hours of my reporting life, my working life, and brought back many old memories until one froze. One memory about him froze. At one of those relaxed open house dinners at his home, somebody asked him if it was dangerous to be in public life as a moderate in Sri Lanka, particularly if you hailed from Jaffna. Now, Neelan was forever a proud Jaffnite. He would take you to a proper Jaffna restaurant at Hotel Renuka, and he said to his interlocutor, this wasn't such a problem, and some risk was always there to be accepted in public life. I said in Sri Lanka, the risk was a bit more than usual. I mentioned my first Sri Lanka notebook of 1984. It contained the names of 28 persons I had interviewed. This was not only Sri Lanka visit. This was in Chennai, or what used to be Madras then. These were the Sri Lankans then exiled in Tamil Nadu. More than half of these had already been assassinated by June 1991. Keep that notebook, Neelan said, and closely watch these survivors. Then he asked if his name featured there, with that smile that, in the words of his student and later a top scholar, Ruvanthi Dichikera, who spoke at his funeral in July 1999, always suggested he was hiding a secret from you. That's what Ruvanthi said, that, Neelan smiled in a way that always made you feel like he was hiding a secret from you. His question was, did his name feature on that notebook? The answer is no. Actually, it did not, because my interviews were in Madras. I had not come to Sri Lanka yet for that story in 1984. But as I remembered that conversation, I also figured that the list of survivors now was down to 7 anyway. Most of these were decent men of peace. There was a scholarly, depressed exile in Madras called B. Yogeshwaran, a TULF MP, a fellow TULF MP of Neelan's. I met him in January 1984 in Madras with his wife Sarojini. Ceylon actually has no future, he said. At best, it will be the Lebanon of South Asia. These words became more famous later as the publication I worked for then, India Today, used these in its advertisement campaign, read today, quoted tomorrow. So once again, what did Yogeshwaran said? Ceylon actually has no future. At best, it will be the Lebanon of South Asia. Yogeshwaran and Sarojini returned to Sri Lanka in 1989 with hope and joined TULF chief A. Amirthalingam in peacemaking. The LTTE shot them both as they sat sipping tea at home. The third TULF MP, again a Sri Lankan Tamil moderate, M. Sivasithamparam, survived with a bullet in the chest. Amirthalingam, as we told you, had been killed already. Brave Sarojini now, Yogeshwaran's wife, persisted, returned to Jaffna, was elected mayor in the city in January 1998 and lived in a house without any security. LTTE hitmen walked in one day and shot her. Lakshman Kadir Gamar, foreign minister, was killed by an LTTE sniper on August 12, 2005. T. Maheshwaran, UNP MP, was killed in Colombo in 2008. Again, the crime being a moderate Tamil. Nadaraja Raviraj, former Jaffna mayor, was shot in Colombo in 2006. Other names kept disappearing from that notebook too. Sri Sabaratnam, nicknamed Tall Shri for his slim, lanky frame, who headed the Tamil Ilam Liberation Organization, or TILO, and who was my nightmare in Madras. It was called Madras then. He was my nightmare in Madras. Why? For ordering endless cups of coffee in my room at the Taj Connemara and finishing my per diem in a couple of hours. He was slaughtered along with 300 of his supporters by LTT in one go. A similar character by the same name appears in Madras Cafe to meet a similar fate. Uma Maheshwaran, who led another LTT rival plot, PLOTE, or People's Liberation Organization of Tamil Ilam, was killed too. Some survivors of the plot formed the mercenary band hired to carry out the 1988 coup in the Maldives that was foiled by Indian forces. Kittu, the one-legged propaganda chief of the LTT, was entombed by the Indian intelligence and the Indian Navy, in a gun-running ship in a famous and frankly brilliant black operation. K. Padmanabha, G. Yoga Sangari, EPRLF MPs were among a dozen massacred by LTT in Madras a year before Rajiv's assassination. Sam Thambi Muthu, the EPRLF MP from Batticaloa, again a moderate Tamil, EPRLF MP from Batticaloa, in whose MP's hostel apartment you were always assured a decent cup of tea and a great conversation, was shot in 1990. Another Tamil MP, P. Joseph, was shot during Christmas Mass in his native Batticaloa, and his wife was critically injured. With Prabhakaran gone, his ideologue Balasingham perishing to cancer in England, only two remained on that initial notebook of mine. One was Balasingham's Australian wife, Adele. The last was a raw mole in LTTE, so I can't still name him. There is nobody all terrorists and militants hate more than peacemakers. The Taliban and the Lashkars killed many more innocent Muslims than Christians, Hindus, and Jews. The Khalistanis killed more Sikhs than Hindus. The Kashmiri separatists will kill more fellow Kashmiris than people coming in from elsewhere in India. And the Maoists will kill more tribals than the non-tribal exploiters. In all cases, most of the victims will be moderate, innocent, unarmed, particularly those seeking peace. In that sense, Sri Lanka's story has not been so different from others. It has just been enormously more brutal in such a unique, clinically dramatic way. As all stories usually do, this one also has a postscript. And this is about Neelan's son Nirgunan, who we call Nigi. And I hope you are watching Nigi, who later became a banker in Singapore. He came for my talk in Colombo in 2013. I was delivering in 2013 the annual India-Sri Lanka Friendship Day lecture, coinciding with the Indian Independence Day. So he came for my talk. I spoke to him about his mother Sithi, and on my way back to the airport, stopped to bow my head to the touching memorial President Rajapaksa built for the IPKF in his new parliament campus, something we had not done for fear of annoying the Dravid parties in India. Senior Indian ministers used to avoid visiting that memorial until then. Now, of course, things have changed. India's politics has also changed. So next time you are in Colombo, please look for that memorial. It's not for nothing that so many of our soldiers who sacrificed their lives because they thought they were fighting the nation's cause in a foreign land, they should not be forgotten. So many of them died, so many of them left a limb behind, and many of the golden generation of Indian military leaders who led them are also on their way now, the latest being Lieutenant General A.S. Kalkat.